Hello and welcome to Catalyze Music Academy. My name is Zaak Kerstetter. I'm an Ableton Certified Trainer. And today I want to talk a little bit about Unison. I've been using Unison in a lot of my sound design recently, and it's come to my attention that not everybody knows what Unison is or how it works or when to use it and why to use it, all that kind of stuff. So if you are familiar with the concept of Unison, this is probably not the video for you. But if you have seen this control here and been wondering what it does and wondering how you can use this to make your sounds sound cooler, this is exactly what we're going to be getting into today. Before we dive into that, I do want to let you know if you are enjoying the content on the channel, please feel free to like, comment, subscribe, all that kind of stuff. It's all greatly appreciated. And if you want to help support the channel, you can check out the Patreon, which is linked below. So let's go ahead and dive into it. So we're going to start from the basics here. We're going to be using a saw wave. Sounds kind of like that. And we're going to be using an audio effect I've used before on the channel, which is the spectrum analyzer. This is a really fantastic tool. This allows you to essentially see what you're hearing. So we have our low frequencies down here, mid frequencies over here, and our high frequencies over here. So when I play a note, you can see those are all the frequencies that we're hearing in this saw wave. So our fundamental is down here. We got that C note and then all of the harmonics up here. If you're not familiar with fundamentals and harmonics and how this all works, check out the video I did about sound design where I cover exactly what all this stuff means and how you can take that knowledge and actually use it when you're doing your sound design. So that's what we're hearing when we're playing a saw wave. So if I wanted to add in some unison, I'm going to switch this on to classic mode inside Wavetable. I'm going to turn the amount down to 0 and the number of voices down to 2. So what this means is that every time I play a MIDI note, instead of playing one oscillator, playing in this case my saw wave, it's going to play 2 saw waves simultaneously, which fundamentally is not going to sound that much different at my current settings. But we'll see the harmonics are slightly different. You can see it kind of messes up. Instead of being like a straight even line of harmonics like this, where it kind of just goes down a nice even line, they're going to be slightly different. They're a little more random, but you won't really hear much difference. So that itself is not terribly exciting. However, if I turn up the amount control right here, what this is going to do is it's going to detune my extra oscillator from my original one, which means they're going to play at slightly different speeds. So we're thinking about pitch and frequency being cycles per second. One of my oscillators is going to cycle slightly faster than the other. So when I turn this up, a couple things are going to happen. Number one, you're going to see a little bit of movement in our harmonics. You can't really hear it yet because the amount is super low, but you can see it bouncing up and down a bit. Like that. So what's happening here is that they're starting to cycle up and down at the same time. And then because one is slightly faster than the other, they're going out of phase with each other and then back in phase with each other. Now, as we turn this up, it's going to detune it more, which means number one, it's going to cycle faster. It's going to kind of like move up and down faster. It's also going to be a lot easier to hear. So as I turn this up, so you can kind of start to hear it shifting up and down, right? And if I go up even higher, you hear it's now faster and more noticeable. You can see them bouncing up and down. And if I turn up the amount beyond 50%, usually I find it just kind of sounds out of tune and is usually not super pleasant to listen to. But just for the sake of example, all the way up to 100%, so you can really hear it there. So that's what's happening. So this is accomplishing a couple of things. Number one is creating that movement where it sounds like it's cycling and things are kind of like going in and out in phase, kind of shifting up and down. It also widens up your sound. So it's going to sound more stereo because it's going to be shifting up left and right a little bit. It also just makes the whole thing sound a little beefier and a little thicker, which is really great. Just for a quick visual representation of what's happening here, if I grab the auto pan, and we're actually going to be using auto pan, I just want to see it with a stereo filter. If I turn up this and I set this to spin mode, imagine this is our waveform. You know, saw wave, triangle, square wave, doesn't matter. And if we turn up the spin control here, it's going to give us a second waveform that's going to be a slightly different speed. So as you can see, they start going up and down mostly at the same time. But the more times it cycles, it moves farther and farther off sync of each other. And if I were to turn this up even more, this is kind of what's happening, but it's happening many, many times per second. It's cycling, it's going out of phase, and then going back in phase, and then back out of phase. So that's what we're hearing when we're turning up our unison. So now that we know the kind of the basics of this, If I start cranking up the number of voices, now I have 2 extra saw waves for every note that I play. And again, at a 0% amount, doesn't do that much for us. It definitely changes the sound a bit, like that sounds different than that, but we're not getting the motion or the movement that we want out of this. So if I start to turn up the amount, again, you can hear it move up and down, and the more amount means faster movement, also more noticeable. Like that. So what this means is we can take what would just be our basic saw wave, and if we start playing some chords, it sounds a little bit more raspy, a little bit more noisy, but also has a lot more movement to it, and I think it sounds pretty good. If you play just like a single bass note, and you get this cool kind of like shifting kind of sound with it, which can be really fantastic, as opposed to just that, which is cool. Sounds cool, but that gets some really cool motion with it. And then if we want to, we can crank our voices all the way up to 8. So here it is with 8 voices. Gives it this very dark, very ominous feel. If I play some chords with it, really fantastic. Just sounds really cool in my opinion. And of course, we can control the amount here to make it really subtle or really obvious. And again, if you go above 50%, it can sound not as pleasant, although you can make it work if you really want to. That's the basic concept here. Number of voices equals number of extra oscillators. And this is true for any waveform. If we switch this up to like a saw wave, or sorry, a square wave, that sounds very different than that, right? So, sounds cool. Also sounds cool. There's lots of fun stuff you can do with it just by playing around with combinations of number of voices and amount control right here. So that's the basic concept. Try it out. It's really fantastic. You do have some extra options here in Wavetable that I think are worth mentioning and worth taking a look at. So for example, we have Shimmer Mode. Shimmer is very similar to Classic Mode, but it's going to randomize the pitch of your extra oscillators slightly. It also randomizes the wavetable position very slightly. So like it could be here, it could be here, it could be there. Wavetable position is not the important thing. The randomization on the timing is what is important. So as we listen to this, you're going to hear it kind of speeding up and slowing down and kind of jittering up and down. If I turn this up even more, so you can hear it kind of changes randomly, which is cool to like get a little bit more of like a reverby kind of sound with it. Like that. So it works great for pad sounds. More kind of like noisier, darker kind of sounds can be really great for that kind of thing as well. Then we have Noise Mode. Noise Mode is very similar to Shimmer, except for it's going to have a faster rate of randomization, which makes it sound more noisy. So if we start with this pretty low and turn this up, you get this very kind of noisy, more kind of like raspier sound with it, which can be cool. Then we have Phase Sync. This one is pretty obvious what it's doing here. You can really hear it. This is going to be adjusting the phase of each one of your extra oscillators. So you'll hear it as I play this. It's going to kind of like, you can hear this pitch motion moving up and down. So you can even see it there. If I play like a higher note. So you can really hear the pitch moving up and down there, which can be kind of cool. Then we have Position Spread. This is going to evenly spread out the position on your wavetable. So for example, if I have, I don't know, 4 voices, one voice might be here, one voice might be here, one voice might be here, and one voice might be here on our wavetable. I think like it's, and other than that, it's also still doing the same unison as Classic Mode. I think can like be kind of subtle, can be kind of interesting. Versus Classic Mode. Here it's way obvious. I think it sounds okay. It's kind of interesting. It's like it's a kind of like a subtle variation on what you're hearing in Classic Mode. And then random note is going to be very similar to position spread, except for instead of evenly spreading out the wavetable position, it's going to randomly pick a wavetable position, which I think could sound really cool on like some of the more interesting, kind of weirder wavetables. In this situation, you'll notice that like each time I play a note, it sounds a little different. So every time I play a note, it's going to be kind of like a different wavetable position randomly. So yeah, those are the extra unison modes. Most synthesizers are not going to have these extra unison modes. They'll have like classic mode, and that's like basically it. But these are worth checking out. I think they're pretty cool. You can do some like subtle, nuanced adjusting of your sound with them. Generally, for the most part, when I'm doing my sound design, I tend to stick with classic or shimmer, mostly classic mode, but try them out. They're kind of fun to play around with once you know how they work. So with that in mind, I do want to take a look at another example of a different situation where you might use unison, because most synthesizers are going to have unison options, and they might be slightly different from each other depending on which synth you're using. So in this situation, I'm going to be using good old Serum. Serum has some really fantastic unison settings that are definitely worth checking out, that I think is one of the reasons to use Serum as a synth over other ones. So our unison settings are all right here. And once again, we're going to be just sticking with the basic old saw wave. So if I turn my unison mode up to 2, so now I have 2 voices, and I play a note, it's going to sound a little crazy. It's a lot. And the reason for that is the detune mode here starts at 50%, which most other detune controls on Unison will start down at 0%, and then you work your way up. This one starts really high. So because it's at 12 o'clock, that ends up being quite a bit. So usually I want to go down from here to dial this in to get trying to find the right amount there. And if you go to the right, it's going to detune it even further, which generally tends to be a lot. So watch out for that. Usually keep this lower, although there are definitely situations where you can go higher with it and make it work. And the other big important difference here is I can have, instead of up to 8 extra voices, I can have 16 voices, which is a lot. Generally, you don't need to go that high, but if you are looking to create big, thick pad sounds or anything like that, it can work out really fantastically. Sounds super huge. It's just one saw wave. And then I can control the amount here. Pretty sweet. And then I have a blend control, and this is a really fantastic tool. This is essentially a dry wet between your original voice and the extra detune voices. So as I move this up and down, you can see it gives you a little diagram there. The yellow line being the original voice, and then the green lines being the extra voices. If I have an even number of voices, you get 2 in the middle, and then all the other ones detuned. So watch out for that. But if I start to turn this up and down, I can control the amount. Which is pretty fun. But those are your basic unison controls. Go up to 16 if you want, although honestly I find like 10 to 12 is usually plenty. Because you can overdo it with unison. You can definitely go too much, and then you'll lose some of the power of your sound if you add too much unison. But yeah, that's the unison controls inside Serum. Pretty straightforward, really easy way to just get basic waveforms to sound absolutely massive, to make some really cool, interesting motion movement, to widen up your sound. Just there's a lot of fun stuff you can do with unison, and I think it's really useful in a very wide variety of situations. You heard it on just playing a single low note. Love that sound. Play it on chords. Sounds great. You can put it on melodies. You can put it on like plucky sounds, can sound really cool. If I were to do something like this to my sound, sounds great. It's like a classic kind of old school synthy sound. Really fun on almost any kind of sound. Just don't overdo it. So that's going to be it for this video. Hopefully you enjoyed watching it. That's kind of some of the basics of Unison, how it works. And now that you know how it works, you can start to integrate it into a lot of your sound design. You can use this, like I said, on nearly any waveform, and it can sound really cool. Have fun with it. Try it out for yourself. Let me know how it goes in the comment section below, and I will see you again in the next video. Thanks for watching.